Hey, what's happening? Before we jump into the show, I wanted to see if you had any music on a hard drive. You have a band, you have a project, and you want to self-release your own music. Well, there's an easy way to do it. You can go to distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate and go get your music up on all the streamers. You keep 100% of your royalties, and you can get 30% off by using this code. It's a great, easy way to get your music up on the streamers and share it with your fans, your friends, your family, your mom, your dog, everybody. Everyone wants to hear it. But go to distrokid.com/VIP/hyphenate, HYPHENATE, and send me the link. I want to hear it too. Send your mom the link. Send your dog the link. They all want to hear it too. We'd like to thank our sponsor, iZotope, the absolute leaders in intuitively designed plugins for audio restoration, mixing, and mastering. At iZotope.com, you'll find a plethora of tools and suites that will enhance your audio production, whether it's voice, video, podcast, or a full production recording session. Check out the industry-standard audio repair tool, RX11, or the multi-tool mixer plugin, Neutron 5, or the powerful Ozone 11 mastering suite, plus tons more. Go to iZotope.com and use the code FRET10 at checkout for 10% off. That's FRET10 to get 10% off at checkout. And again, the website is iZotope.com, IZOTOPE.com.
Anyone else could just make a piece of shit. This is the band's story. This is when they put out this album. This is what they have to say about it. This is a contemporary artist speaking about their influence. The band would never want that movie. And any fan who sees this movie and says like, yeah, I really wish it was that, you're wrong. You're a bad fan if that's what you want, because the band doesn't want that. The first thing they said is we don't want that. And if you want to watch that, you can watch that cookie cutter for 100 other musicians. But what does that have to do with this band?
What's happening? Thank you so much for tuning in to Hyphenate with me, your host, Randy Randall. That was Alex Ross Perry there talking about his new film, Pavements, which will be ending its run in select cities today, Thursday, June 12th, but will begin its run for on-demand streaming on Mubi, MUBI.com, starting now. How exciting. I get to sit down with Alex and talk about Pavements. He's the director. He was the one with the vision. He saw the movie and he saw the movie that he wanted in his head, and brought it to life with Robert Greene, who we heard last week. And it was really fun and interesting sitting down talking to him and hearing, what type of how tight the hole in the needle was that he had to thread with this. there were restrictions and what it could be and what it shouldn't be, and what the band wanted, what the label wanted or didn't want, what the band didn't want it to be, what the label didn't want it to be, and what did he want it to be, or what did the fans want it to be. So it sounded like there was a lot of things that it shouldn't be. But at the end of the day, he had to come up with what it was. And I think it's a huge success. It's a really fun film. I'm excited I get to talk about it for another week here and have this great conversation with Alex Ross Perry, who, you can go find him on his Instagram at Alex Ross Perry, AlexRossPerry. That's on the Instagrams where he posts about the movies he's promoting. Utopia Films also has a great Pavement film. It's Pavements with an S .official.film for any other screenings or any other events or anything else that they're doing with this great film. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Los Angeles is doing great right now. I know there's this past weekend, there was National Guard, and there were protests, and there were riots, and LA is a thriving, exciting, vibrant city. And this federal government is a fascist, police, warmongering, dystopian horror show. It's insane what ICE agents are trying to attempt across the whole the whole country, but specifically here in Los Angeles, I'm proud of all the protests and all the demonstrations and everything that's gone on this last weekend, because fuck that. Fuck ICE getting pulled out of your place of work and your business and leaving your kids abandoned on the streets. This is not America. This is not the America that we live in. This is not California. This is not Los Angeles. So we will see. The situation is ongoing, obviously, but I think the response of the community and the city at large and in protest in response to ICE has been incredible. And I think it's going to continue going. And everyone can see what kind of bullshit Trump's trying to pull. He wants to declare martial law to make it seem like, LA is on fire and it's been taken over by illegal immigrants, and it's just not true. It's insanity. I mean, I live here with my family, and there are a lot of families that live here, and LA is not taken over. Don't believe whatever Fox News propaganda you see. This is a thriving, loving, beautiful cornucopia, a variety of cultures and people from all over the world that, really express, I think, the dreams of Martin Luther King and the dreams of a diverse state and a diverse city that, we live with each other. We live on top of each other. We live all around each other. And is it perfect? No. Does it have a lot of improvement? Yes. There's so many things about LA that are worth criticizing, but ICE is not the answer to any of those criticisms. So, good job, LA. Keeping everybody free. This is police free zone. This is a place of action. And I don't think it's even an LAPD thing, surprisingly enough. With everything else going on, I think, I haven't dug into all the stories and read enough about it, but it really seemed like it was the federal National Guard being called in, and obviously this like weird cowboy ICE agency. So, way to go. We're doing good. And here it is, my conversation with Alex Ross Perry. Alex, thanks so much for jumping on Hyphenate. How are you doing today?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Thanks for coming on. It was great meeting you at the LA screening. I was fortunate enough to do the moderation for the first one. You've probably been to about 48 screenings now since then.
Maybe a handful, certainly. I mean, that was kind of the end of traveling, but I think we had 3 more after that one, and have a couple coming up here. New York in the next couple of weeks.
How is it being on this side of the filmmaking process? I mean, we'll get into the other side of it, but now that we are on this side of it, going to screenings and things, how has it been?
It's fine. I neither like it nor dislike it. It's nice to sort of have the interaction element, and it's nice to sort of sit there and see dozens or hundreds of people who have elected to make an event out of the movie and go out and stay out. And that's really nice. And that's important. And that's especially post-pandemic, a great thing to see. But it's exhausting and it doesn't benefit me at all. So
personally, there's not much of a reward on that side, but you are single-handedly keeping the babysitting industry afloat in America.
In a way, yeah. I'm trying to solve that for next week, and it's tough. But no, what I mean by that is people don't think about this, but every day that I'm, going to screenings, that's just time wasted. I'm not you don't get paid. It's not that it's part of the job, but you go out to LA for 5 days and you do, I think we did 5 Q&As maybe in town. And it's you're just kind of expected to do that as a courtesy to the distributor who keeps 100% of the money you make from more tickets are sold because I'm there for a Q&A than might be sold otherwise. But you don't get even a 5% cut of the ticket sales for a Q&A screening. So it's kind of peculiar the way that's structured.
Right. I have to imagine. Yeah. I mean, I come from a band world where it's probably akin to doing signings or in stores or things like that where,
Yeah, except you don't, I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but like, you don't have to do a tour of those. You do the tour, which you do get paid for.
Right. There's a little add-on, little extra things to make your life in London and New York a little bit harder than they would be jumping across town in a taxi with all your gear.
I don't mean to sound like embittered about it, but it's just been on my mind lately of how much time that is and how much of an ask it is to spend hours or days or evenings just like helping someone else make their money.
Yeah, well, therein lies the rub, right? In the larger sort of condition of the contemporary film, commercial film
ideal.
budget.
It's not ideal.
Yeah. Well, what about coming into the film? Going back to the other side, when this idea was first brought up to you, how did it first hit you, or how did you first get involved?
I suppose that somewhere along the line, and anyone could tell me this was at any point, Matador, unsurprisingly, as legacies go, just said it's allowable and maybe the correct thing to do for us to make a movie. They had maybe, I think, around this time regained some sort of international control over the entire Pavement catalog. There was some like logistic impetus of let's try to do some stuff. And I think part of that was finishing the like 10-year long project of doing the deluxe edition box sets, re-releases of all the albums. And it just came up to them and they reached out to some producers who they had worked with. And one of those producers reached out to me. And the way he described it, it sounded really interesting. It's not that he said the concept that I had, but he just said, here's what they don't want. And I was a fan, and I really was a fan of Malcolmus as a personality. And I just said, like, yeah, that sounds cool. Let's give it a try.
You said when he said what they don't want, you agreed with those things. Yeah, it shouldn't be those things. That's what sounded interesting.
Yeah. Well, just not, they don't want a cookie cutter documentary. They don't want talking heads. They don't want the band sitting there and waxing poetic about how great things were and how influential they are. Like, they just didn't want the things that you see in every meat and potatoes legacy music documentary.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And from that pitch or from that sort of like throw down, where do you, or are you immediately onto Broadway show, onto kind of faux Hollywood big biopic? Are you thinking in multiples like that, or did those just kind of grow up, or what was that process like of kind of creating this kaleidoscopic sort of multi-layered narrative?
It was pretty much the first idea I had. It was there right away. And I have like some of my early outlines to prove that really within like a month of this initial phone call, like my first documents have this multi-tiered, multifaceted, prismatic approach to what I was going to then suggest to Malcolmus. Because I think like those are a bunch of ideas and I came up with them all fairly quickly, but only because the idea I had, the initial idea and the only idea was, this is a movie in which, let's presume, Pavement are a band who, over the years of their career and their post-breakup career, have been feted or honored or dishonored with every form of legacy building project that does exist. And that's the thing. So in the world of this movie, what if they are truly the band that their hardest core fans have seen them as for 30 years? And we make a movie within the reality where they are, as we say on screen, the most important and influential band. Mm-hmm. That's not a lie to thousands of people. They are the most important, influential band. But the movie had to live in a world where that is a fact and not an opinion. And I just thought immediately, like, what if they're David Bowie, or what if they're the Beatles, and you have 5 other films that have already been made, and you can just license that footage and use it in your movie. When they make a new David Bowie movie, they just license Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars concert footage. They license a clip of him in The Man Who Fell to Earth. And a David Bowie movie then has a lot of fluidity in its visual language because of how much film there is about him.
I see.
And yet that becomes an entirely accurate and credible way to tell his story. So I thought we should just do that. But because Pavement aren't that, we have to make everything first. Mm-hmm. Then the movie can have it all. And that was kind of it.
Oh, that's interesting. I spoke to Robert Greene recently, your editor and co-collaborator on this project, about that the idea of visualizing the show don't tell element of talking about Pavement's music and kind of talking about Pavement as a band, and how do you show it on screen, and that idea. I like that, sort of the collage or the mosaic sort of approach to it. In that there was, many documents that then you could pull from, not unlike other documentaries or other pieces.
That's the hope. I mean, you make a movie about a real legacy band, you just have those. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have them. We had obviously plenty of archival, because that's a thing that anybody could have. Any band could have had some bozo following them around with a camera, and then boom, 20 years later, they've got 100 hours of what was then crap and now is invaluable. And that's very easy. If we didn't have that, that would have been a lot harder to fabricate. But knowing that we had that, and knowing that we could eavesdrop on them with a camera for the rehearsals and the tour, it didn't feel too crazy to say, we're going to build these 3 other false flags of Pavement monuments, and then we're going to film a documentary about those, and that's the movie we're making.
Got it. I mean, for you, as a fan of Pavement, I mean, what was it? Did you have a vision of how to, when you first were approached with it, like how do I, represent what I feel this music is? Or was it more of a relationship about the fandom and sort of the communication? I mean, were you coming at it from an inside perspective, or I guess more of an outsider kind of way of like constructing it from, what did this band mean, or what did this band mean to me, or what did it mean to the fans? How did you count yourself among the fans, I guess, in that kind of way, like making it for yourself or making it for someone else?
Well, yeah, but I think like the challenge on anything you would do like this is every fan is different. And I can only make something that speaks to what I like and what I find fascinating. And those two things very easily could be different from somebody a little bit older than me who was listening to Crooked Rain on the floor of their dorm room in 1994 when I was 10 years old. That's Robert. So that's why the collaboration is invaluable, because what I find fascinating is Pavement as the most perfect vessel for examining and questioning and studying and dissecting the idea of success contemporaneously and in retrospect, and the idea of commercialism contemporaneously and in retrospect, and the way that these narratives have shifted 180 degrees in my lifetime of what it means to not be a musician, but to just be an artist, to be a creative person in the 90s and to be a creative person today, and the challenges and the changing landscape of that, and marketing and accessibility is completely different than it was when this band started out and existed. I'm fascinated by that. That is not a story about Pavement. That is a story that Pavement can be used to tell. That to me is fascinating. Some people are fascinated by the way Malcolmus tunes his guitars. I'm not. I don't care about that. I don't understand it. And it's not accessible. Like 10% of this band's fans could understand that. 100% of people who lived at any point between the 90s and today could understand the story we're telling about the changing cultural mores of what it meant to be a band like Pavement in 1985 and what it means to be a band like Pavement reuniting in 2022. That was what my story had to be about, not because my opinions on the band stand above everyone else's, but because I'm the one making the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone else could just make a piece of shit. This is the band's story. This is when they put out this album. This is what they have to say about it. This is a contemporary artist speaking about their influence. The band would never want that movie. And any fan who sees this movie and says like, yeah, I really wish it was that, you're wrong. You're a bad fan if that's what you want, because the band doesn't want that. The first thing they said is we don't want that. And if you want to watch that, you can watch that cookie cutter for 100 other musicians. But what does that have to do with this band? What is that format, that style, that visual storytelling, the use of sound, the use of editing? What feeling does that evoke that has anything to do with Pavement? But that's what some people want. And there's just really no getting over that.
That's so funny. I'm picturing now just like the VH1 behind the music, or the, like, the salacious, sort of where are they now? And kind of, big negative flashes of Steve Malcolmus as a young man now into an old man with gray hair. Like, what happened? The recluse of Malcolmus has not been seen, only caught on tennis courts, has never been back on stage till now.
It's easy to picture, and it's easy to picture some of our younger musicians who in this movie we have performing their favorite Pavement songs at our Pavement Museum. It's easy to picture the movie that just interviews those musicians.
Oh God. I didn't
but
think
what's
of
the point of that?
Right.
I mean, that's all we had to avoid.
The talking heads of,
girls who were, Sophie Allison, soccer mommy, was born in 98. So she loves Pavement, but she was 1.5 years old when they broke up. So you can either talk about your sensation of discovering those albums, which is the same as everyone else discovering those albums, except she's a great musician herself. Or you can say, pick your 3 favorite songs and just play them with conviction. And that's all we need. And that's what I want a musician to do when they're explaining to me with their own art, what the music means to them.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I think we've definitely hit on what it's not, but I mean, in terms of what it is, were there any particular, probably not music docs, but other forms of documentary or even just storytelling, visual storytelling or film that you were inspired by or were looking towards when putting this together?
I guess so. There's stuff that's kind of, I mean, it's so many things because, even we have this little runner in the movie where it's like 1.5 minutes of every member of Pavement just listing so much music that they're inspired by. Mm-hmm. And I could certainly do the same, and I could explain or not explain them, but it's stuff that makes no sense until you think about it. Like the editing rhythms of Dunkirk and Inception, which to me were the most essential things in the world for us to study with our multi-pronged approach to, like one of my favorite, most influential things of all time, the Great Rock and Roll Swindle, the Sex Pistols movie that is a concert film, animation, scripted. It's full of lies. It's beautiful. It's, concert film, like it's everything. Something like that is just inimitable, and 100 other things. And part of that is, not even like Stop Making Sense, but just other Jonathan Demme projects where you just have a filmmaker who wants so badly to speak the language of music, which he was able to do in 6 or more credible projects. But his main thing is that he makes scripted films. But therefore, when he makes the music film, you can just always feel the guy is just a fan and he wants to hang out with musicians. And that's influential and that's exciting to me. And we talked about the Todd Haynes Velvet Underground movie, which is very similar, and 100 other things. But even Malcolmus in the movie says, when he's talking about the Eagles influence Range Life or classic rock influences Silence Kid, like it's, he says, I'm inspired by things that sound like shit to me. And I can be inspired by things that look like shit to me or are shit to me, which is to say, like, you're not above being influenced everywhere. Like, I watched 2 very good, but cinematically very not what I was going for documentaries on HBO, one about Tina Turner and one about Alanis Morissette. Neither one of these films gave me a single visual, aesthetic, or editing idea. But both of these films ended with these women attending the opening of a Broadway musical of their catalog, which gives me a humongous idea. How can I get to a scene in a movie where we're opening a show of the band's catalog? Because that beat is in both of these films and it passes by without a second of scrutiny. And I just thought, well, that beat should be in this movie too. Who's to say just because Jagged Little Pill sold 20 million copies and Wowie Zowie sold 200,000, who's to say that there's anything different about this story?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. Well, the one thing I was going to touch on, Jonathan Demme. I remember watching a great New Order music video that he did, where it's all just close-ups of him in the studio with the band. It's these like hyper close-ups of just the mouth on the microphone, or just the hand on the bass, the fingers on the keyboard. But it was like the best type of fly on the wall filmmaking, that feeling where you really do feel like you're just hanging out with the band, like if you were a fan in that room with them. Yeah. And they don't look particularly interested if they're not pruning or looking at the camera. The band looks more bored than they've ever been, and it's very intentional that way. It's just the band very routinely going through rehearsal to this iconic song. And
I don't know that
I would have
video, but
I would have to look it up. But yeah, but when you speak to the idea of just the music fan inside Jonathan Demme, I remember seeing that early on. And
it's very relevant, and it just gets into like, what are you making a movie about? Are you making a movie about being a fan, or are you making a movie because you want to make something that speaks to what that band's music evokes in you as a feeling or as a visual notion? And that's what we were aiming for. Just because I'm not a documentary filmmaker, so I've never made like that kind of documentary. I'm thinking of it in a totally different way.
I want to respond to that, but I did just look at it. It was A Perfect Kiss was the music video.
Okay.
You're seeing it. But I mean, because, was it difficult in, like you say, not being a documentary filmmaker and approaching it in this way? What was the reception like, or within like the making of it, when talking with the band or talking with the label, was what you were going for, what they were going for as well? Like, were you able to sort of show as it was going, this is not traditional in the idea of, and I love an outline that says it's not any of these things. You're like, okay, great. Here's what I have. You're like, well, how do you, where do you hit the bullseye on that?
They were aware, they were into it, and Malcolm thought it sounded cool just because it was a surplus of ideas that I think to him sounded extremely atypical. And I think to him, it sounded like, we don't need you that much. I'm saying all these things, and he's probably hearing like,
oh, right.
I don't have to make a musical. I don't have to make a scripted thing. And that's probably really appealing to him. But from all along, like, it's not that I think that anybody forgot we were making it, but you show up to film rehearsals for the tour May of 2022, and Spiral says, any idea when this will be done? It's like, this is our third day of filming. And that's how people who don't make movies think about things, is like, now that you're started, when do you finish? And you just have to explain to people, like, I have no idea how long this is going to take. And it was 2 years plus later that we were showing a finished film. For making a movie, that's not so bad. But for people who don't make movies, they probably assume, like, we're filming this in May, this could be finished by October. Why not? Like, that's how long music videos take, right? Like, so it's just sort of, I think because of their focus on the tour, this tour that just went on for like a year and a half or whatever. It's just, who would have ever stopped to just really say, like, let's check in on Alex and Robert and see what they're doing. Because most of the time we were just, Matador was always on these calls where we were trying to raise money. So no one was ever like disengaged, but it would go 6 months at a time without me interacting with or emailing or seeing anyone in the band, just because we were raising money or trying to figure out how to pull off the Range Life scripted, we were just working on it, and they were touring or doing other things. And it just was sort of harmonious that, the film's producers, Matador, Chris Lombardi, Gerard especially, they were on all these calls where we were trying to raise money or get stuff sorted out. So it's not like anyone ever would have had no idea what was going on. But it was just very clear to them, because this is what we said, it's going to be a fairly long process with a lot of stopping and starting.
Mm-hmm. And again, getting back to the idea of, this isn't an hourly wage job. This isn't, you get paid the same way if you make it in 2 weeks or 2 years.
Right. Well, I didn't get paid for it at all, really.
So there you go.
Which is a bummer, but such is life.
Yeah. Oh man. The Range Life, as like a scripted film, was that ever, was there ever a serious version of that, or was it written with a tongue in cheek kind of pinch of salt moment, or how far is the satire in that piece itself? Could it live on its own, or is it only?
It could, but it would be shit.
Okay.
I mean, that's the thing. These things are all shit. Like Bohemian Rhapsody and A Complete Unknown and the Bob Marley movie, and all these movies live on their own. The Amy Winehouse movie, 4 Beatles movies. Like, of course it could live on its own. The Motley Crue movie, The Dirt, which is, maybe one of the best of all of these, because at least it's stupid. But of course it could live on its own. It would be unwatchable, but I consider most of these movies unwatchable. There's another Malcolm's line in the movie where he says, "You make a virtue of deficiencies." When I wrote Range Life, and to be clear, the longest version of that script is 45 pages, which is about 90 shorter than a full movie script would need to be. The intention was we would film all 45 pages. By the time we're making the movie, and we're just hitting a moving target of Joe Keery's schedule. When that target finally presents itself, we only have the money that we have, and we're not going to miss our target. So we're now making Range Life for less than half of what it was budgeted for, to shoot 45 pages on 35 millimeter in credible sets, locations. But we've now made every other part of the movie. And because we spent 90% of our time with Slanted Enchanted filming the casting and the rehearsals, and 10% of our time filming the show, and we spent 90% of our time in rehearsals with Pavement, and 2 days filming their concerts, we now know for Range Life, we can just spend, we had 6 days to make it, 5 with everybody and 6 with Joe. We can spend like 3 or 4 of those days just filming the idea of going to make this biopic. And then we can spend like 2 days making the movie itself and shoot. How much can we afford? 4 scenes filmed correctly on 35 millimeter. But even while we film those, we're going to be rolling a BTS camera and seeing what moments we get of the actors working on the scene. So it's just sort of changed because it had to, but it changed into something that was better. The movie's better because we didn't have the money to film every one of those scenes. Because every scene, I know now, it's just the same bullshit over and over. It's every single moment of a band's narrative rendered as though every moment was significant, important, crucial, and every moment of these guys' lives said something that is retroactively clear about who they were and who they are, which is, of course, not the way a single moment in anybody's life has ever happened, but it's the way lives always look in retrospect, and it's the way biopics look in retrospect. And 40 minutes of that would have been really exhausting. The 15 minutes of it we have in the movie is exhausting because I think most of these movies should be 20 minutes long. And then I would watch an hour and a half of the actors working on it and finding the vocal. I would watch that, and then 20 minutes of the movie is all you need. So it stands on its own, but it stands on its own as like, like a 5 out of 10 piece of filmmaking.
That's interesting. What about like books, like rock biography books? Like, have you gotten into reading those even outside of this? Like the bad rock biography book?
I read those constantly. Yeah. Kind of the whole section I have back here at the bottom of the shelf. This is all all music. You can probably spot the 33 1/3 section down here at the bottom. I love that. And that, that's been important to me for a long time, not just because I love nonfiction. and I love oral histories. But what I love about that, and this was very influential to me when working on Her Smell, the last fiction film I made, which is about a fictional rock band, is I like that you can listen to some music. You can put on a CD and it lasts for 30 to 60 minutes. But I also like that the project of a good book or a good film, and even just a so-so documentary, which is why I watch hundreds of them, is I just like the idea that, yes, these 12 songs that you listen to on a CD, that's an experience. But the other experience you can have is the narrative of that CD. The band finishing the last tour, writing it, recording it, touring it, supporting it, making the videos. Like, I just like the idea as a writer that narrative is anywhere. There's a narrative behind every little moment of people's lives. And the bad thing about these terrible biopics we're talking about is they try to consolidate some really interesting moments in the lives of great talented people into 2 hours. But maybe with the exception of a 33 and a third, none of these books, you read them in 2 hours. You read a definitive oral history, it's 500 pages. You're reading it for weeks.
Yeah.
And even that experience of letting the narrative be that slow is really valuable towards creating a sense of stories as being kind of quotidian with lots of contradictory memories and this and that. But I am a fan of a good music book, and I'm always on the lookout for ones that seem like they're of interest to me.
That's incredible. Yeah, I spent a lot of years touring, and we would definitely pass like bad books around the van, or even between other bands. You know, there was a lot of reading getting done and just travel from show to show. And again, the worse they were, the better. Like, I think that the Anthony Kiedis one was the one that just made us laugh for months.
Yeah, people like that. I mean, that's the kind of thing life's too short to read that. But like,
I mean, he's a monster. It's a kind of a, between a horror show and some kind of like, Hollywood,
but also like
Hollywood tragedy story.
But like, I'm sure it's written with a co-writer or a ghostwriter or something, but like, that is an autobiography, which, I've maybe never read.
Oh, okay.
Because like, to me, like, the movie that you don't want is the movie that is essentially made by its subject. It's produced by them. They're commissioning it. Maybe they're paying for it. They have final say. That's an autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
I want an oral history. I want a critical biography.
I see.
I want a theoretical biography of an artist. I'll turn around, like, even like the closest thing I'm seeing back there to an autobiography, and is anything but, is that incredible Beastie Boys book.
Oh yeah.
Which is made by Adam and Mike D, but it's a visual and compelling and collage approach to telling their story.
Sure.
The written autobiography is just the same thing as the movie we didn't want to make. And as much as you can not imagine Malkmus ever in his life writing his version of Scar Tissue, you wouldn't want that either. And he's not going to do it because he's better than that. So the movie had to not be the movie version of the way he'll never bother to tell his story.
Absolutely. I think there was something that just showed ego run rampant that was so entertaining to us as a band, or to that particular, you're in a hyper ego environment and this pressure cooker of being on the road as a band, and to see just the worst version of that person, to check in with them while you stop for gas, in a very unglamorous sort of gas station, and just have a very unglamorous life, but you can lead this. It's just like, there was something very like ego checking. I think if it wasn't consciously explored, I think just to explain the part of that where it's just like, this is hilarious how insane these people are. The other one that made it around was the Ray Kroc story, the grinding it out. We were all vegan in the van, and just reading the Ray Kroc story that eventually became the founder. But it was his own life story of like myth making of the person of the man. And this is like how, again, just ego just exploded. If these megalomaniacs could write their own Bibles about themselves,
I don't know. I don't see a single, I don't see a single autobiography, and I don't have any downstairs either, but that's just not interesting to me.
Yeah. I understand.
Because the people I would want to engage with or grapple with as a filmmaker or as an audience member are the people who would view that as a fairly appalling enterprise.
Mhm.
And I think it's safe to say Malcolmus does and would. Like, of course he would. He's not a sociopath. So he would not say, like, get me a book deal. I want to sit down and write my memoir and like.
Or play it out as a Lego version of himself.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, but you know, like, I guess, you know, like there are notable exceptions. Like Kim Gordon's book is a real thing, but she's on another level of like what she, you know, I guess there are good versions of this that I'm kind of like remembering now, but so it's not an absolute, but I asked her, like, she said, like, for example, her idea on like a autobiographical film, she just like said some words and I was like, that's insane. And yet that would be the best Kim Gordon movie possible.
Mm. Well, that'd be like, what you mean if she were to do one?
I mean, I was just like telling her about pavements and free associating. And she's like, yeah, if I were ever to do anything, I would always want it to be something like this. And when she said, I was like, yeah, that would be insane. And that's exactly what fans would want. But you wouldn't learn anything about your life from watching the movie you just described.
I see. I mean, how important, I guess that's not really the part of Pavements either, though. You're not really learning about the band, right?
See, I push back against that. I mean, if it was up to me, you wouldn't. And it was always in the initial conception that you wouldn't. But Robert, who is the world's biggest Pavement fan, said, we're making the definitive Pavement movie.
Mm.
There's never going to be another. This is it. And I keep hearing this, and I don't say, you know, I'm not saying your experience, that someone says this, I'm not like, you're wrong, but it's like, people say like, oh, you don't really learn much about the band. If you're not a fan, I don't really know how much sense this will make to you. And I'm like, believe me, I said, like, do we need to go EP by EP? Do we need to do Watery Domestic and Demolition Plot and show? And Robert's like, yes, we do. And I'm like, people say like, oh, you don't really learn much. And I'm like, really? We cover how they met, what their first release was, what every release after that was, when they signed to Matador, and when and why they put out each album the way that they did. Like, so I feel like people receive that information in movie form and they're not like, oh, I'm learning a lot, because none of that is interesting. That's just the way everything works. There is no movie about a band that's not like, and then they put out this album. What people mean is like, I'm not learning what inspired Malcolmus to write those songs. And it's like, well, neither am I. And I don't even know what one would have to do to get him to explain that. He wouldn't. There's no world where I could have answered those questions of like, why did you do this on this record? Because we have a clip in there where he's like, some records we play strip poker and some records we play gin rummy. It's like, yeah, this guy just thinks like, maybe I'll just fuck around and do something different next time. And to scrutinize that, to, you know, educate people about what he was thinking at the turn of the career at every step. That's what people think is learning about the story, but you'll never get that out of him. And I don't want that. I never even bothered to ask. I don't care at all. It's so irrelevant to what is interesting to me about the band. Because if someone said to me, like, describe what you were thinking about and walk us through the inspiration making X movie after Y movie, I'd be like, that's the most appalling question. I'm not like, who cares? I don't want to answer that. So I would never ask these, you know, musicians that either. It's just not the purview of what I was like, you know, what's interesting to me.
Mm. Yeah. I guess I mean, in the sense of, you know, I mean, like their personal lives are not really in the film at all. And again, I can appreciate, you know, a level of privacy that goes into all of those things, but that's sort of what you would get in the, you know, there's always the girlfriend, or there's always the, you know, the muse, or the something in those types of, you know, sort of more traditional biographies.
I guess so. I mean, that is true. None of that's in the movie, but like, and I, you know,
not that it has to be. I'm just
no, yeah. but people expect that, and I'm saying this. You know, this is obviously somewhat a funny statement, but not really. Like, I cannot emphasize how little I care about that. Like, nothing interests me less. Yes, of course, in the span of being around the filming, I know Spiral's wife, I know his daughter, but like, the details of this are so uninteresting to me, and I'm the one making the movie, and even Robert, the world's biggest Pavement fan, he's not interested in that either. Because that's not the band. That's 5 different guys' lives when they leave the stage.
Mhm.
Our movie doesn't leave the stage with them. It's all about what it's like when these 5 guys are together. That's when the band is the band. So when they're not together, it's not about Pavement. Now it's just a movie about Mark Eybold tending bar in Brooklyn. And that's not what we're making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I would see how, the scene where Scott talks about the time he went on a date and at IKEA and then writes the song. Well, then I wrote the song,
Sure.
and you're like, oh God, okay. Like how interesting could this be? Or he didn't do that, but he makes it up, or he doesn't see.
Yeah, but who cares? And
Yeah.
but then there's a moment in the movie where he's just talking to Rebecca, who's playing keyboards and percussion on this reunion tour. And he's talking about the last reunion tour. And he says, since the band broke up, he'd run out of money and gotten a divorce, and he was going to get a job as a bus driver. And then Malcolm said, we're going to do a reunion tour. And I suppose other filmmakers, other documentary storytellers would scrutinize, what was that period like? Did you resent Malcolmus for those 10 years where you were just unemployed and running out of money? Why'd your marriage fall apart? Whereas for us, we're like, that's the complete story. Who's this other guy who's been in the band since the beginning? He's a guy that when the band breaks up, his life falls apart and he has no money and he gets a divorce. What happens when the band reunites? Things start going better for him. Like, there you go. That's the story. We can tell you that in 30 seconds.
Right. Yeah. It's not about their solo careers or the things in between or the other art or whatever else they make.
No.
The other bands they've been in.
Yeah. When people say like, oh, you don't learn anything, it's like, yeah, I mean, you don't learn that after the band broke up, Mark was in Sonic Youth, but like, we have too much story to tell anyway. We can't start talking about all the things that happened between 2000 and 2022.
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot of life there. One thing that, that came up is the idea of, what is there, does this, I guess it's get into the story of substance, but like putting meat on the skeleton of a band that has broken up, and at this point, they're not a legacy artist, or there's still an artist, there's still a band that as themselves, and sort of where does a film like this sort of play into that role of sort of what's, what a band is doing at this point in their career like this? I mean, how do you face that, or how did that sort of come to you? Like, is this, in terms of not putting more meat on the bone, or not overly, going so far with it?
Explain that.
I guess just in the sense that a band, in the life of a band, it's a prolific sort of time where they're working and writing, and they're, like you said, they write, they tour, they come back and they write, they tour, they write, tour. And for a band like this, a Pavement, where they're fundamentally playing 20 to 30 to 40-year-old songs on a tour every 10 years, where does a story like this sort of fit in? Was it important to see them as a living band, as a band that had broken up, as what I mean, and sort of like capturing what is a Pavement now? Yeah.
Well, the sort of opportunity to be present for the reunion was really enticing, because that is essential to a film like this. And by all accounts, even when I started researching, I knew that the 2010 tour, which I saw, which was my first time seeing the band, had sort of fizzled out and ended somewhat unremarkably, and then resulted in another decade of inactivity. And you don't know if that's going to happen again. But I guess what we were hoping for was that something different would happen. Now, we're also hoping that something dramatic happens while you're rolling. To their credit, really nothing did. No fight, no, oh my God, this shit again. I've been dealing with this for 30 years. Can't believe you haven't changed. Like, we got none of that, because there was none of that. Now, that's great for their dynamic. It's less ideal for a narrative movie that wants a moment like that, but that's fine. And the question of like, that was the question of the reunion for me, was like, when I saw them in 2010, I'm the youngest guy at Central Park Summer Stage. I'm there in 2010. I would have been like 25 years old. Everyone there is 35 and older. Now when I see them every show, the tour, everyone there is 10 years older than me or 15 years younger than me. Nobody there is my age. I'm seeing these shows when I'm like 30, 36, 37. There's a lot of 19, 20, and 21-year-olds there, and a lot of 47 to 55-year-olds there. And what I had seen happen between these two tours of my own experience in the audience was we could have walked into these shows and we had no idea about TikTok or Harness Your Hopes or any of this new Gen Z Pavement love that this whole entire generation of people are like, this is one of the most remarkable and authentic and brilliant bands that I ever missed. It could have just been me and a bunch of guys older than me again, and that would have been fine, but that's not a very good story. What we got was a much better story, because by the time they were on stage again, yes, they're a legacy band playing 30-year-old songs with no new songs, but half of every room is people who've never seen them before. It's not 90% people who'd seen them in the 90s and then a few guys like me. It's thousands of young people, some of whom could have been not even born when they broke up in 1999. And that is a remarkable thing. And that, again, like, you don't get that with other bands. Other bands either never went away and therefore never allowed a generation to sort of long for them, to discover them not as like a depressing, constantly touring legacy act, but to discover them as this perfect object that just exists under glass that you totally missed. Or the bands that people feel that way about simply you can't see them. You can't see Nirvana. You can't see David Berman. You can't see Elliott Smith, but you can still see Pavement if they choose to tour. And that authenticity and that realness, I think, is just so unique in a way that, again, to my whole point, I'm telling a story about that. No other band works for that story. No other band was so acclaimed, but so commercially tepid in their main run, and then emerges 20 years later, bigger than they've ever been, bigger tour, bigger venues, higher ticket prices, and a more diverse fan base. If something that similar has ever happened, I really can't think of it. When the Pixies reunited in 2004, I was so excited. Everyone there was someone like me who discovered them when they were broken up, or someone who'd seen them at the time. Now they just tour all the time. Kim Deal's out of the band. They don't have that excitement. They could never recapture what that tour felt like for me and for fans who had seen them or had missed them. But if that tour had been transformative, like Pavements, it could have been a different story. But they just kept making new music that even a diehard fan like me is not kept up with. And that's the difference between a Pixies and a Pavement reunion, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a list in there, My Bloody Valentine, Dinosaur Jr., to different degrees of, the 90s sort of reunion bands.
Yeah.
I feel like Dinosaur Jr. has probably done it the best in terms of releasing new music that still hold on to whatever the first, some of those first excitements were.
Sure.
If I had to pick one in terms of making new music, I mean, it wouldn't know whether Pavement makes new music or whatever, was to come next from that,
Whereas I'm now thinking like, what what and when was the breakup of Dinosaur? Like now I'm like, what was, because like
when
I'm
Lou
just
left,
like thinking,
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
depends
I'm just
who
thinking
you ask,
like,
right? Yeah, when Jay.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like, what are the eras of that band that I'm like? I guess there's a movie about them that's supposedly good. I haven't seen it, but like,
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I would learn if I watched the movie.
That would be a hard one. I just think based on Jay's
it exists.
Public
it's
things.
Called Freak Scene.
Oh, okay, I'd have to look and see how they did.
I think people like it. I don't know why I haven't seen it. 2020 Freak Scene: The Story of Dinosaur Jr.
Okay, must have gotten squashed in the pandemic. I was probably washing my groceries and worrying about the future of the world. Didn't see it. Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your thoughts and insights and everything that went into the film. What's next for you? Where do you go after something like this?
Nowhere, I guess. I have another documentary that I made kind of before and concurrently called Video Heaven, which is going to be released this summer. It's a essay film about the history of video stores.
Oh,
told entirely through their depictions in film and television shows.
That sounds
I'm incredibly
like fun.
proud of it. Yeah, it was great. So I finished that movie as well around the same time. And after that, I mean, after those two side projects, what's next is hopefully some jobs.
That's always good. I saw in your biography you worked at Kim's in New York.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. I worked at a video store in LA called Rocket Video that was on La Brea and Melrose for a bunch of years. I couldn't leave. I worked there during college, and then after college stayed there. And kept going till it closed.
What happened to that? When did it close?
It's a great question. It was run by two Icelandic like businessmen. They're entrepreneurs. They started the first private TV channel in Iceland, and then they came over here and created this video store. And then eventually it went away. I'm going to say probably by 2005, 2006.
Yeah. I remember this from some of my earliest trips to LA.
Yeah. Rocket was
seeing information.
Rocket was pretty good because we had a good network of other video stores, depending where people were coming in from what part of town. And if we didn't have it, we could tell you who did have it, which was really fun. As that resource, there was, there's Vidiots out in Santa Monica now.
I forgot about this place.
But Rocket was fun. It was a lot of, like I said, I was probably there from 2000 to 2005.
There's Yelp reviews here from 2010.
Wow. I guess it lasted that long. I don't know. It seemed like it definitely had died. It became like a dog daycare center. I moved out of that area in 2009, so I definitely don't remember it being there then. Right. But anyway, it's funny there's still Yelp reviews. It was fun though. But I felt like it was like that kind of film school, to the the way Quentin Tarantino always talks about it, or that type of thing. There was definitely a lot of characters that worked there, and the characters that would come in. We had Faye Dunaway, who was just outrageous in just being Faye Dunaway, off screen. But I remember the great one. She double parked. We were on La Brea, which is a big kind of thoroughfare in LA for people that don't know. But she ran in and threw the film on the floor. And I'm double parked on La Brea. We're like, we can't just throw these tapes in here. She's like, I'm double parked. And she came in another time when she didn't have the film, but she tipped me $5 to ride it over on my bicycle to her house. Once it came in, I had to drop it off to her house, a personal delivery. It was fun. It was lots. And then Leonard Cohen beat up the gumball machine. We had one of those big kind of gumball machines you'd have in video stores, and he put the quarter in, didn't work, and I saw him violently shaking it. And this is when he'd come down from the mountain from his monastery, and he was staying with his daughter in the area, in the West Hollywood area, and they were getting a film, and he was just so pissed at this gumball machine.
Okay. Yeah. No, I haven't thought about that store for a while.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I'm interested in seeing more video store content. I miss that sort of dialogue or the community that sort of existed in video stores. Yeah,
of course. Well, the movie's about that.
Awesome. Yeah, I find a lot of my video store content comes from podcasts like Blank Check, which you've been a guest on. I've enjoyed your episodes
many times. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved seeing Griffin in the film as Steve West. I mean, he seemed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a brief cameo.
Of course, but you can't do everything.
It was great though. It was fun to see him in it though. Nonetheless, it felt a great shout out. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate it. Is there a place where people can follow you for more information, or you like people to keep in touch?
Yeah. I mean, well, when's this come? I mean,
this will be out next week.
Yeah. So Pavements will continue to sort of be around in theaters, through Utopia throughout all of June and even into July. And then by late July or so, it'll be on Mubi streaming kind of worldwide. So it's accessible. I don't know. Do you know exactly when this comes out?
Thursday, July 12th. No, I'm sorry, June 12th. June 12th.
All right. Well, yeah. So the movie's just around. And yeah, I'm only on Instagram of just my full name, where I really just only promote things. So it's not like a personal or exciting glimpse into my life other than things I have to let people know about, but that's about it.
Awesome. That sounds great. Well, thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
There he is, Alex Ross Perry. The name of the film is Pavements. You can go to pavements.official.film, and you can also follow Alex Ross Perry on his Instagram. And that goes by his name, Alex Ross Perry. He has a new film coming out. I think he said, it's coming out soon about video stores and video stores on film. Sounds exciting. I can definitely relate to that. I think that'll be super fun. I am a big fan of video stores. We got a really fun one happening now here in the Eagle Rock area, Vidiot's, which moved from its Santa Monica location over to the east side and has been doing incredible screenings and also functioning as a great video store. I wish we lived closer. I would be there all the time. All right, that's going to do it for us. Again, fuck ICE, fuck Trump, and let's be safe out there. Bye.
And we make a movie within the reality where they are, as we say on screen, the most important and influential band. That's not a lie to thousands of people. They are the most important and influential band. But the movie had to live in a world where that is a fact and not an opinion.